And I think this next wave of what we've gotten into, and my project's been doing for 15 years, is these non-DNA cases. Because if those mistakes are made in rape and murder cases that lead to wrongful convictions, if there's bad identifications in rape and murder cases, then there's bad identifications in all kinds of crimes. And so it's absurd to think that it's only in these cases, the rape murder cases, where there's bad lawyering, bad police conduct, bad prosecutorial conduct, bad identifications, snitch testimony, all the things that we know that lead to wrongful convictions. But they're much harder cases, because now we have to deconstruct the original case and put it back together, track down the witnesses, prove people are testifying falsely, and those cases are much more difficult than DNA. But it's important that we pursue them because it's just a small percentage of people in prison who have the potential for a DNA test that's going to prove their innocence.
I want to make you all aware of some critical trends in the world of the Innocence movement and Innocence projects. One trend is that the importance of the Innocence movement and projects has never been greater than now. In fact, according to the National Registry of Exonerations, .com, the highest number of exonerations ever in the United States occurred in 2013. This is going on right now. This is not a declining trend, this is an uptrend. These exonerations revealed some further critical developments, the first two of which might seem counterintuitive, but which really should open our eyes that innocent people can be convicted in all kinds of circumstances. The first trend is that exonerations are occurring after cases where the defendant originally pled guilty. Increasingly also, exonerations are occurring in cases where no crime occurred. Where no crime occurred. And even I, in the middle of this, when I first heard that, I thought, wait a minute, what does that mean? But that's 1/5 of the 2013 exonerations, no crime cases.
The shaken baby and the arson cases usually are because they're no crime cases. The science has now evolved to the point where we're arguing a crime never actually occurred. And that's because of new developments. Just like DNA is a new development from before it was used on a regular basis, we're doing the same thing now in the medical fields and other scientific fields.
You know, the science is really cutting edge and really interesting, and what is being developed is just fascinating. You know, to be able to get so many different markers on a Y chromosome and be able to identify, you know, they're getting to the point where they can identify like different male relatives from others, and like it's just, you're really going to be able to do some really innovative things, I think, with the science, which is always developing.
Another trend is the beginning of statistical models and applied case information toward determining, this is a question I get a lot, toward determining how many people are in prison are likely innocent. And very recently, it was nice of the National Academy of Sciences to release their study just a few days before our event. That study just released a few days ago showed that 4.1% in their model, 4.1% of people on death row across the country are likely innocent. Now, this is the National Academy of Sciences. You know, this is not, it's not an Innocence Project number, it's the NAS number. And the study is frankly very disturbing. That's 1 out of 25 people. So that's something else that we took great note of. And a very positive factor is that increasingly exonerations are occurring in cases where the defendant and the prosecution work together and ultimately agree that the person is innocent and that the person should be released and exonerated. This has been a goal of mine to further this effort to work with prosecutors. I'm very encouraged that this is something that good prosecutors are figuring out is actually not only to their benefit politically, but also obviously in furtherance of justice in the appropriate cases. So I'm working with a good number of prosecutors in that regard, and frankly, I'm very proud to be a lawyer in those cases. Very proud. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
I came into the practice of law at Tom's right elbow as an assistant U.S. attorney. Tom was somewhat feared when he came to the U.S. Attorney's office because his whole experience was as an antagonist of that office. He'd been a defense lawyer, I think, for 26 years when he became U.S. Attorney, and I happened to be an intern in the office when he on his first day, and he called all the assistants into the ceremonial courtroom on the 25th floor of the Dirksen building, and he looked at them and he said, "If I ever catch any of you doing anything unfair, I will fire you." And of course, that scared all of them. It sounded pretty good to me, though, because I was hoping for a job in the office, and it sounded like there might be some turnover. Certainly, from Tom Sullivan, you can learn first and foremost dogged dedication to the cause of justice.
In September of 2001, 19-year-old John Grayson from Aurora was convicted of first-degree murder and attempt murder in Kane County. After his conviction, John was sentenced to 76 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections with an out date of 2057, many years from now, obviously. John was sent to Menard Prison. While at Menard, John's direct appeal to the appellate court lost. At that point, few people knew that John's jury had convicted an innocent man, and his legal options were certainly dwindling at that point. Several years later, an amazing thing happened. Two Aurora Police Department detectives, and I'm going to say their names because it's very important, Detectives John Munn and Darrell Moore. Detectives Munn and Moore received evidence which strongly indicated Mr. Grayson's innocence. Rather than simply disregarding that evidence under the banner of, "We already have someone convicted for that offense," these detectives, under the direction of their commander and chief of police, began to reinvestigate the case in full. They also advised Mr. Grayson of the exonerating information, and that if their further reinvestigation continued to demonstrate John's innocence, that they would do what they could to overturn his convictions. Detectives Munn and Moore did indeed continue to reinvestigate the case, and that work continued to reveal that John Grayson was an innocent man. John, though, did not hear anything further about any of this for several months, and he reached out to our project for help. During 2011 and the early months of this year, we interacted with the Kane County State's Attorney's Office as they struggled to determine what should be done with the new exonerating evidence. By agreement, we engaged in certain forensic testing, and we put additional information and legal and factual arguments before the state's attorney for his consideration. And as part of advocating that the new evidence warranted the full overturning of the convictions, we stressed that prosecutorial dynamics had changed in the past 10 to 15 years as awareness of the incredible number of wrongful convictions in this state and in the country, as that knowledge became more widespread. We reminded the state's attorney that now the public and the prosecutor's duty to seek justice required prosecutors to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem when there was exonerating information of this nature. And on March 6th of this year, Mr. Joseph McMahon, the Kane County State's Attorney, a man of honor and integrity, did the right thing when he agreed to vacate Mr. Grayson's conviction and set him free because he was factually innocent. It was a great day for Mr. Grayson, obviously, and a wonderful day for our justice system. This case is remarkable for numerous reasons, but I will mention just three. First, it's remarkable because of the incredibly professional, thorough, and frankly, heroic actions of the Aurora police detectives and their command in not ignoring that which came to their attention, which exonerated John Grayson. And second, it's remarkable because of the equally professional and praiseworthy actions of the state's attorney of Kane County that led to the ultimate result. It's worthy to note what Mr. McMahon did in an effort to resolve his struggle over what to do with the new evidence. Among many other steps, he consulted various professional organizations and their standards for prosecutors in situations such as these. He assigned the case to prosecutors who had not been involved in the original trial, sort of a mini integrity unit, which obviously is something to applaud. And he took into consideration the information and arguments and other matters that our project provided to him and worked with us in regard to certain forensic procedures. The actions of both of these branches of law enforcement stand in brave and stark contrast with the many stories about how law enforcement will sometimes do anything to hold on to a conviction. We know of those cases. But fortunately, this case stands, as I said, in bold contrast to those other kinds of situations. I might add at this point that a huge part of the reason why the culture is hopefully changing is found in the work of many of you here today, but in particular our esteemed guests, Scott Turow, Tom Fitzgerald, Senator Durbin. It is the work that they have done over the years in Congress, as prosecutors in the Scott case, as prosecutors in the Graylord case, representing Alex Hernandez, as defense attorneys for other innocent clients, as advocates to the governor and to the legislature and in Congress, obviously. It's those kinds of things and many more, and speaking out publicly in the Chicago Tribune and other well-recognized media sources. It's these kinds of things that have emphasized the vital goals of justice, of getting it right and making it fair. This has, in turn, laid the groundwork for good prosecutors like Joe McMahon to be able to do what he did. 15 years ago, I'm not sure that this could have happened in Illinois. I'm not sure. I don't think it could have. So thank you for your work that has led to this culture, this change in culture. I'm so proud to have worked with these officers and prosecutors. I'm hopeful that their actions and the actions of others in similar positions will contribute toward making this type of process the norm instead of the exception. And the third reason, I did mention three, the third reason why this case is remarkable is because there is a young man, one who spent nearly a dozen years locked up for a crime that he did not commit, who is now free and who has a new lease on life. And his name is John Grayson, and I'm proud to introduce him to you because his freedom and his presence here tonight, that's what this is all about. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without anything further, please welcome John Grayson.
Male and female exonerees, in my experience, tend to be suffering through some very different experiences and issues. Most of the men that we've worked with at Life After Innocence did not know the original victim in the case, wasn't at the scene, didn't even know anybody associated with it. So it's already traumatic to be wrongfully convicted. Most of the women are not only wrongfully convicted, but they were the parent or caretaker of, in most cases, a child who was killed. So most of the women we work with, 85% of the women we work with were convicted of killing either their own child or in one case, the court ruled that okay, you didn't know that your boyfriend was going to harm your daughter, but they ruled that she should have known. No father has ever been convicted on a should have known basis, but this woman was. So imagine the trauma of losing your child, period. Then in violent circumstances, or sometimes it's not even violent, it's a fall, and no one, kids fall off decks and sometimes have strokes or they, die, and then sometimes bad medical testimony will send the person away. But the point being, with women exonerees, they are very often convicted of killing someone they knew well, were taken care of, or was their child. So the despair and grief and issues that they have to go through is just, and I can't even imagine, because I feel like most exonerees have just gone through something so profoundly traumatic. And with women exonerees, it's like times 300. And I don't know how they do it, but they're the most gracious, lovely women who are determined to go on with their life.
Yeah, women do face a few different barriers than men. A lot of the times when women come home, they're handed their kids, you know, and she's not even given an opportunity unless she's self-employed or something. She's not given an opportunity to go to work because of her background. She's end up on welfare. She ends up in an abusive situation. You know, it's just so many things that can happen to a woman that men pretty much don't have to go through, you know.
Women in Innocence came about as a result of, I attended my first Innocence conference in the spring of 2010. And they had like all the exonerees go into one session. I was getting real overwhelmed emotionally in there, and it was like too much testosterone because it's all men. There was like one or two other women, and one of them was Gloria Killian. And Gloria's like a little gray powerhouse, you know. And she's like, what about us? What about us? It's not all brothers, you know. There's women too. And so we were like, I was like, okay, well, why don't we have like a women's session thing? Because there were all these little breakout sessions. And so we had this conference. And being an academic, I was like, you know, we need to have research in this area because women are prosecuted very differently than men are. For example, Andrea Yates, when she killed her children, her husband left her there with them knowing she was depressed, homicidal, suicidal. Her psychiatrist had told her mother and he both that she wasn't safe. They left her home with those kids 40 hours a week, maybe 50 hours a week. So she kills the kids. Nobody says boo about his responsibility. Nobody. Now, Tabitha Pollock is asleep in her own home, has no clue that her significant other male is harming her child. But as soon as she gets woke up and realizes it, she tries to save her child. She's put in prison for the rest of her life kind of thing. This is just one of the examples where women are held accountable. They ought to know. There are several women who have been put in prison because they should have known. And women who are, you know, for example, myself. It was not hard for them to make me look guilty because innately, a mother who survives a child, especially in a violent situation like that, I felt guilty. Nobody had to make me feel guilty. Nobody had to say I was guilty. I felt guilty. You know, how could I have lived and Joel died? I mean, you know, a mother, in nature, there's one occasion, socioculturally for us in America today, there's one occasion where it's appropriate for a woman to become violent. What is it? To protect her young. That's the one occasion. When can men be violent? Lots of times. It's not hard to convince a jury that a mother's guilty if she survives the children. Darlie Routier out in Texas. I mean, that case, I mean, I may not like that woman. She may have been a lousy mom, but she did not kill those two boys. She just didn't do it. She did, however, survive. And she's on death row because of it. Well, that and Susan Smith. Everybody was pissed about Susan Smith. They were sick about Susan Smith. They had been burnt and they were mad and it was not going to happen to them again. Darlie Routier, she was going to death row because they weren't going to get fooled again. So anyway, women have different issues. And women are prosecuted based on slamming their character. They spend more time for the same crime. They are viewed, there are totally different schematics for who a woman is and who a man is. A woman's evil. She plots, she schemes. A man, I mean, there's just a million ways they're different. Men leave DNA evidence. Women don't. Circumstantial cases, much harder cases. I was like, okay, well, we need to explore this. We need to, we could do it and have fun. So we had a fun conference. We had spa things and we did fun. And it's worked out. We've got research now. And Women in Innocence is now a program that Northwestern Center on Wrongful Conviction.
We've also seen this global movement. We've seen projects spring up in England and in Ireland and New Zealand and Australia and France and Italy. And for me, I've been particularly involved in spreading the movement through Latin America. I'm very tied to Puerto Rico, being a place where I grew up. And so I helped launch a project down there at Interamericana Law School. I live on the border to Mexico, 15 minutes from it. So we got a project started in Tijuana. We got a project started in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and in Santiago, Chile. There's a project now in Bogota, Colombia. And for the past 3 years, we've been all meeting once a year, and we've formed a group called Red Inocente, which just means Innocent Network. And our first conference was in Santiago, and last year we had a conference in Buenos Aires, and this year we're going to be in Bogota. And you really see excitement of this movement in Latin America, and there's nowhere that it's needed more. I always say that up here we're looking for the needle in the haystack, and down there there's a haystack of needles. I mean, everywhere you look there's problems, particularly in Mexico. Mexico is struggling with their criminal justice system, and the only statistic you need to know about Mexico to know that there's problems is that in 95% of Mexican criminal trials, the judge doesn't show up. That's how bad things are down there. And they have this new system that they're integrating that's supposed to be fully operational by 2016, where they're going to, for the first time, do oral trials, where lawyers are going to do cross-examination and direct and do all the kinds of things we've been doing in trials here for 200 years. And it's really exciting to be part of it, and there's tremendous opportunities to shape a new justice system working with the lawyers down there, but it's an incredible challenge. My dream is that we have 100 Innocence projects just in Mexico in the future, and I still think we wouldn't be fully dealing with all the problems. And I'd like to see them grow in Bolivia, in Peru, throughout Latin America. This isn't an American problem, right? I mean, we've been coming up with some solutions, but it's not an American problem.